This is Rabbi David Foreman. Welcome to Parshat Vayishlach. Last week I talked with you about a statement that the sages make concerning Yaakov's curious tears when he first meets Rachel. Vayishlach kol vayef. He raised his voice and cried. Our sages connect this to the last time we had Vayishlach kol vayef in the Torah, and that person was Esav. Esav cried when Yaakov tricked him and managed to get his father Yitzchak to bless him instead of Esav. And Chazal seem to tell a story that connect these two events. They tell us, in effect, that one set of tears created another set of tears. That at some level Yaakov understood when he first saw Rachel, somehow he would never completely have her. They wouldn't be buried together, according to one interpretation. He didn't have enough money to marry her outright, according to another interpretation, and therefore is subject to his father-in-law tricking him, substituting Leah under the chuppah instead of her. Esav's Vayishlach kol vayef, raising his voice and crying, somehow was the cause, later on, of Yaakov raising his voice and crying. In any case, one of the challenges I mentioned is if you accept this analysis of the Medrash, how do we reconcile that with our viewing Yaakov as a role model? He's one of our forefathers. He's an ish emet, according to Chazal. How do we make sense of all that? I want to suggest a theory to you based upon a fascinating textual pattern, and, I think, hinted to in Chazal and Medrash as well. Let's go back to that event that I just referenced. And then I want to play this little game with you. Where else do we hear all this? So I'm going to lay out this setting for you. Various different features of what occurs here. And as I'm doing that, I want you to ask yourself, where else in the Torah do all these features reappear in another story? Okay, here we go. Genesis 29. Right before Yaakov encounters Rachel for the first time, he's running away from Esav. He comes to Haran, comes upon a well. V'hinei sham shlosha edrei tzon rovtzim aleha. There were 3 groups of sheep waiting by the well. Okay, that's element number 1. In what other story in the Bible do we meet 3 groups of sheep? Next element. So Yaakov encounters the shepherds of these 3 groups of sheep and asks them, Achai, me'ayin atem? My brothers, where are you from? He wants to know the identity of all these people and sheep. And strangely, he calls these shepherds, who he's never met before, my brothers. Next element. Odenu medaber imam v'Rachel ba'a im atzon. As Yaakov is talking to these shepherds, Rachel comes. 4th element. When Yaakov sees Rachel, Vayigash Yaakov, Yaakov approaches. In what other story do we then have Yaakov approaching? 5th Hebrew word, after Yaakov approaches. Vayishlach Yaakov l'Rachel, Vayisad kol vayef. Yaakov kisses Rachel and lifts up his voice and cries. In what other story, after all of these elements, does Yaakov again kiss someone? And does Yaakov again cry? What other story has all of these elements? The answer, of course, is in this week's Parsha, when Yaakov meets once again his brother Esav. Yaakov leaves Laban's house and receives word that his brother Esav is coming to meet him with 400 men. He fears for his life, but decides to confront his brother to attempt to reconcile with him. He sends him gifts, flocks of sheep, 3 different groups of sheep. Chapter 32, verse 20, Vayitzav gam et hasheni gam et hashlishi. There are 3 groups of sheep. And after the sheep, Yaakov places himself and his family, and last of all, Rachel. Esav encounters the sheep. When Esav finally meets up with his brother Yaakov, he asks, who is all this? Identify all this. And finally he sees Yaakov's family, and then he sees Rachel. Yaakov approaches Esav. Same words as last Parsha. Lageshet vayigash Yaakov. Esav runs to embrace Yaakov. Yaakov embraces him, kisses him, and cries. It's all happening again. The setting for the encounter is the same. The 3 flocks of sheep. The question is the same. My brother, identify all of this. Rachel is the same. She appears. Yaakov's approach is the same. Yaakov's embrace, his kiss, and his tears are the same. The only thing that's different is who he's embracing. This time he's not embracing Rachel. He's embracing his brother, the brother from whom he's been alienated these 20 years. And now let's go back to what our sages say about how Yaakov cried when he first saw Rachel. In that moment that he first saw her, he had a premonition that something would get in the way of him completely having her. And the sages seem to identify the root of that as the tears that Yaakov provoked in his brother, which the Torah characterizes using the same language, Vayishlach, when Esav found out he was deceived. As God's providence would have it, there would be another time later in our Parsha in which Yaakov would fear the imminent loss of Rachel. And that fear comes to fruition when Esav advances to meet him with 400 men. The moment he first met Rachel had been haunted by memories of Esav's tears, and now the moment at which he might lose her for good has come upon Yaakov. It's almost as if the same story is happening. It's as if the scene is replaying itself, the scene through which he first met her and first feared that he would never have her. Will that fear come to pass? Will she be taken from him now? He will either know the joy of having Rachel or the unspeakable pain of being deprived of her. It all hangs on this knife edge. But the bold choice that faces Yaakov is, what will he do with his brother? In the end, he embraces him. They kiss one another, and they cry. And in that moment of reconciliation, when there's no deception anymore, Yaakov looks Esav in the eye and says, take these gifts. Kachna et birchati. Take my blessing. Take my blessing that I'm giving you. The double entendre is hard to miss. I once took a blessing from you. Take a blessing now from me. Yaakov insists. Esav accepts, and he leaves in peace. And Rachel and the rest of Yaakov's family is safe. Yaakov, in the end, is an ish emet, is a man of truth, but not perhaps because he was born that way. None of us are born people of truth. We develop into people of truth. Yaakov develops into a man of truth too. It's one thing to never lie, to never deceive. It's another thing, after having deceived, a far more difficult thing, to be able to encounter with integrity your old nemesis, a nemesis who's a brother, and to be able to truly try to make peace, and to be able to succeed in that effort. When you do, that's integrity.
Hi YouTube, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And for even more amazing Torah videos, check out aleph-beta.org. Just click the link below.